Hey y'all, it's Jonathan. I'm back with another video. Happy Black History Month, and I just want to say that I'm excited to see a lot of new faces back over here. That subscriber count is going up, as it usually does every Black History Month. People will start finding the channel, and just so y'all know, we do all Black books 365 days a year. So join the family, subscribe, and you can get recommendations on books by a majority Black authors all year. So, join the To Be Black and Loved family. So I have been super excited to see all of the releases that have been coming out in 2025. And outside of just doing reviews when I have finished a book, I have always kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about just the books that are catching my eye. If you don't know, I also work part-time as a bookseller at an indie bookstore, and so I'm always seeing the books that we're getting in, and I'm taking pictures of them just to add to my own TBR. And then people always want to know what I'm reading, what I'm interested in, what has been coming out, and so I'm like, how can I actually do this? So I'm going to compile all those books that over the course of the month I see coming out, and I'm going to release a video at the end of that month, early in that next month, with a sort of compilation of all of the releases that have come out that month for y'all, so that you can know what's out there, what's available, and what you should be picking up next. So if you want to know what came out in January of 2025, keep on watching, and let's get right into this. I'm kind of going to go from the end of the month to the beginning. I have a few fiction releases, a few children's books, a few YA, and one nonfiction book to kind of get into. So we'll go through these pretty quickly. I'll tell you a little bit of the synopsis, and then, you can join the conversation in the comment section below if you have any books that you think I should have on my radar that I missed, or if there are any books that you heard about that you're super interested in and want some more information about and may actually pick up. So, we're going to start with Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. And if you aren't familiar with Charmaine Wilkerson, she is the author of Black Cake, which had a adaptation that I think is on Hulu that came out last year. And I have not read Black Cake yet, but I've heard great things about it in addition to the television show. So I'm super excited after I finish this book, because I'm currently listening to Good Dirt on audio. Once I finish that, I'll definitely check out Black Cake. So the synopsis reads: the daughter of an affluent Black family pieces together the connection between a childhood tragedy and a beloved heirloom in this moving novel from the New York Times best-selling author of Black Cake, a Read with Jenna book club pick. When 10-year-old E.B. Freeman heard the gunshot, time stopped. And when she saw her brother Baz lying on the floor surrounded by the shattered pieces of a centuries-old jar, life as E.B. knew it shattered as well. The crime was never solved, and because the Freemans were one of the only Black families in a particularly well-to-do enclave of New England, the case has had an enduring, voyeuristic pull for the public. The last thing the Freemans want is another media frenzy, splashing their family across the papers. But when E.B.'s high-profile romance falls apart without any explanation, that's exactly what they get. So E.B. flees to France, only for her past to follow her there. And as she tries to process what happened, she begins to think about the other loss her family suffered on that day, 18 years ago. The stoneware jar that had been in their family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. But little does she know that the handcrafted piece of pottery held more than just her family's history. It might also hold the key to unlocking her own future. And so this seems to be like another one of those like multi-generational tales. I always love those books that kind of revolve around a family heirloom, kind of reminding me a little bit of like The Piano Lesson by August Wilson. There have been a few other things. I think that Lush Lives kind of dealt a little bit with that, finding out a little piece of family history and kind of diving a little bit more into that. So I always love those. And so I'm currently listening to it. I'm enjoying it so far on audio. And when I finish it, I will give y'all a full review. The next one is a romance by Julian Winters, and I have read a few of Julian Winters' works. He's done some YA romance in addition to writing some adult romances, and so I'm really interested in this one. It's a fake dating romance, and the synopsis reads: sometimes fake dating your ex can turn into a second chance. When Denzel, Denz, Carter's workaholic father and CEO of 24 Carter Gold, unexpectedly announces his retirement, the competition is on for who will become its successor. To convince his judgmental family members that Denz is capable of commitment, he impulsively lies about being in a serious relationship. Problem is, the last serious relationship he was in hung him high and dry after leaving the continent. Now Denz needs to find a fake boyfriend to bring to family functions and seal the deal on the CEO position. To do so, he enlists the help of his best friend and roommate, Jamie. Someone his family already accepts in their inner circle, but when his BFF is a no-show, Denz is forced to turn to the last person he wants to be in a pretend or any relationship, Braylon, the man who broke his heart. Braylon's sudden reappearance in Denz's life turns everything upside down, but apparently he needs Denz's connection to the mayor to win his own promotion, and Denz is currently up a creek without a paddle. So they strike a deal. It's all business, but between the funny text and the confusing kisses, soon enough Denz is struggling to separate business from the affairs of his heart. So this is a fake dating romance. It sounds like something nice, lighthearted, nothing too heavy. And I love a Black romance. I love a Black queer romance. So I definitely want to support Julian Winters and check this one out. I did pop this in on a actual Black romance display that we have over at the bookstore. So if nobody else picks it up, I will definitely be picking up. I'll see if it's on audio also, because I want to get through some more books this year. My reading has not been as good as I've wanted it to be. And then we have got a non-fictional release, and all three of these have come out January 28th, right at the end of January. And this one is called From These Roots by Tamara Lanier. And I think it kind of fits into like a biography memoir category. And this follows Tamara Lanier, who grew up listening to her mother's stories about her ancestors. As Black Americans descended from enslaved people brought to America, they knew all too well how fragile the tapestry of a lineage could be. As her mother's health declined, she pushed her daughter to dig into these stories. Tell them about Papa Renty, she would say. It was her mother's last wish. Thus begins one woman's remarkable commitment to document that story. Her discovery of a 19th century daguerreotype at Harvard University's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, one of the first ever photos of enslaved people from Africa, reveals a dark-skinned man with short cropped silver hair and chiseled cheekbones. The information read, Renty, Congo. All at once, Lanier knew she was staring at the ancestor her mother told her so much about, Papa Renty. In a compelling account covering more than a decade of her own research, Lanier takes us on her quest to prove her genealogical bloodline to Papa Renty. That pits her in a legal battle against Harvard and its army of lawyers. The question is, who has claim to the stories, artifacts, and remnants of America's stained history? The institutions who acquired and housed them for generations, or the descendants who have survived? This one sounds interesting. It sounds real deep. It sounds juicy. It also sounds very, very heartfelt. I mean, I can only imagine knowing that a university owns what really should be an artifact that is owned by and kept by the family. I'm interested in checking that out. I do want to get back in my nonfiction bag this year, so I'm going to add this to my list of nonfiction reads for the year. I'm going to run through a few of the children's books that came out in January. All of these are picture books, and I think that all of them are nonfiction, which I think is good. You know, you want young kids, especially young children, to really, start learning a little bit about history, Black history, early. So the first one is How Sweet the Sound, a Soundtrack for America. And this came out January 14th, 2025. And this is by Kwame Alexander. And Kwame Alexander did the crossover series in addition to The Undefeated, which is an award-winning book. And he's done a lot of other children's books that usually deal with like the arts. Listen to the sound of survival, courage, and democracy, the soundtrack of America. Hear Billie Holiday's raspy, mournful voice and tap your foot to Louis Armstrong's trumpet. Scream with James Brown and bop your head to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Can you spot the 80-plus references to artists like Robert Johnson, Ella Fitzgerald, Jimi Hendrix, Whitney Houston, Lauryn Hill, and Beyonce? Come dance to Kwame Alexander's melodious narrative of the history of Black music in America, accompanied by the vibrant illustrations of Charlie Palmer. So, this one sounds super, super cool. It does seem like it also includes a lot more context and history about the music and the musicians. So I think that especially, as the people that are having kids are, kind of distanced a little bit from what is current pop culture, we do have to kind of like reinforce that history and educate younger people about the artists that have come before, those that are their favorites and are on their Spotify playlist and go into their shuffle on Apple Music. I'm often having conversations with my own students about music where they're kind of like unfamiliar with a lot of the artists that I grew up listening to, and really think that like some of the music that I see as like contemporary music to me is like old school to them. So I think that is something that is very, very important. History that is very, very important to instill in children, because music does have such a huge impact on everything culturally. The next two are both, one is about James Baldwin, one is about Toni Morrison, and they both came out on January 7th. The first is And She Was Loved, Toni Morrison's Life and Stories by Andrea Davis Pinkney. Stunning poetry and illustrations introduce a new generation to the beloved literary icon Toni Morrison by New York Times bestselling author Andrea Davis Pinkney and Caldecott Honor winner Daniel Minter. And so this talks a little bit more about Toni Morrison's childhood, in addition to what kind of drew her into writing, which landed her with a legendary career as a writer, helping to change the world with novels like The Bluest Eye and Beloved. And so as a fan of Toni Morrison, I definitely think it's important to introduce children to these authors when they are young, even if a lot of the authors' catalog cannot necessarily be read at that age. I still think that there is work by Toni Morrison and James Baldwin that is available for younger children. More recently, Toni Morrison Treasury, which is a collection of stories that Toni Morrison adapted. I think that those sorts of things are available for young people, so you definitely should introduce them to these authors young, so that when they do get of age, they can read more of their literature. And then we got Go Tell It, How James Baldwin Became a Writer by Quartez Harris, and this also came out January 7th. It says, the first time Jimmy read a book, the words clung to him like glitter. Before James Baldwin was a celebrated novelist, essayist, playwright, poet, and activist, he was a boy who fell in love with stories. The words opened up new worlds for young Jimmy, who read and wrote at every opportunity. He ultimately realized his dreams of becoming an author and giving voice to his community. And in doing so, he showed the world the fullness of Black American life. And so this is an introduction, a biographical introduction to James Baldwin, talks a little bit about the power of language, and there is more biographical information and personal notes from the author and illustrator in this book, so that young people are still getting like factual information about this author. So I'm super, super excited about that. Hopping back a moment to the nonfiction, there is another book that came out January 7th. It's called Music, Muscle, and Masterful Arts, Black and Indigenous Performers of the Circus Age by Sakina M. Hughes. This sounds super, super fascinating. And it reads, before the heyday of the Chitlin Circuit and the Harlem Renaissance, African-American performing artists and creative entrepreneurs, sometimes called Black bohemians, seized their limited freedom and gained both fame and fortune with their work in a white-dominated marketplace. These Black performers plied their trade in circuses, blue tents, and Wild Wild West shows with Native Americans. The era's traveling entertainments often promoted the disappearing Indian myth and promoted racial hierarchies with Black and Native people at the bottom. But in a racial economy rooted in settler colonialism and legacies of enslavement, Black and Indigenous performers found their otherness could be a job qualification. Whether as artists or manual laborers, these workers rejected marginalization by traveling the world, making a solid living off their talents and building platforms for political and social critique. Eventually, America's popular entertainment industry could not survive without Black and Native creative labor. As audiences came to eagerly anticipate their genius, these performers paved the way for greater social, economic, and cultural autonomy. Sakina M. Hughes provides a conceptually rich work revealing memorable individuals, laborers, artists, and entrepreneurs who, faced with danger and discrimination, created surprising opportunities to showcase their talents and gain fame, wealth, and mobility. All right, and then last but not least, we've got Togetha by Keith F. Miller, and this is the sequel to Pretty, which I really enjoyed. And Pretty was a Lambda Literary Award finalist, and this sequel finds Jay and Leroy together again as they fight to save not only their home but themselves from the powerful Bainbridge family's treacherous endgame to retake Savannah for themselves no matter the cost. And so this is a really good queer Black YA romance with a little bit of action. You know, sort of like, it reminds me of a lot of the books that I read when I was in high school, like The First Part Last, and like The Skin I'm In, and like all of those novels, even like a touch of like Blueford High, as kind of problematic as that is now that we know that it wasn't written by Black people. But I definitely would recommend checking out Pretty, and then of course picking up the sequel Togetha, which came out right at the top of the year on January 7th. And I did start listening to Pretty on audio, so I definitely would recommend checking it out. So those are the books that have caught my attention that have come out in January of 2025. I would highly recommend checking them out. Please do, please comment below, please subscribe so that you can join the family and keep up with these updates about books that are coming out this year, and, you know, checking out some reviews, letting me know what is going on, what have you been reading, what looks interesting to you, and I will catch y'all in the next one. So always remember that you